oh gosh, I don't remember exactly what the premise of the show was, but that was Plexus number 7.
Right.
Plexus number 8 was at the Luminary Art Center in St. Louis. And that was something I applied for and I got. And it's this amazing art space that used to be in an old nuns convent.
Mm-hmm.
They have since moved to another space that they actually own now, which is amazing. And that's another amazing art space in St. Louis. But by this time, I'm already getting a lot of requests to do stuff. Plexus number 9 was in Peel Gallery in Houston, and the gallery owner contacted me, Steve.
Right.
Steve Hempel, and he has since closed, but he brought me to Houston to do Plexus number 9. Gosh, this is walking memory lane.
Yeah.
And Plexus number 10 was my first overseas trip. That was at the National Center for Craft and Design in the UK.
Sure.
And I mean that was pretty amazing because that was the biggest piece to date I had done, and I did this sort of maze-like little 4 structures we had to work around.
Sure.
That was really, I mean, it was an amazing experience. And Plexus number 11 was also in the UK, in London, at the Courtauld Institute of Art.
Oh, wow.
They do like a biennial called East Wing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the students who put together this show, and that was done in the same trip. I was able to do Plexus number 11. So up to Plexus number 11, that's 2011. That's 1 year.
Wow.
So from Plexus number 5 to Plexus number 11 was 2011.
So is that kind of holding pace, like 10 or 11 a year?
No. No. Third year I did I think I did 16.
Wow.
And I realized that I couldn't keep up that pace.
Right.
So now I do somewhere between 4 and 8 a year.
Okay. And so tell me about temporary versus permanent installations. So a lot of them are temporary because they're part of museum spaces and it's tied to maybe a specific show.
Yeah.
I assume that some of your private commissions are intended to be more permanent, right?
Yeah.
And do you have to take anything? Do you have to think differently with it being permanent versus temporary?
It's the same process. The only thing that comes into play when it's a permanent piece, and I have the opportunity to come in when they're still sort of building, that it can be integrated in a more seamless way into the building.
Okay.
And in terms of the material, I just use the same.
Right.
And clients know that they might have to hire me to redo the thread.
Okay, and I guess that's the question I had in my mind is, what have you learned to this point about the conservation of your work, and how untouched, is there a time frame when some of these threads start pushing back on the fact that they're under so much tension?
Well, I don't think they're under that much tension.
Okay.
I think it's polyester. It's a very stable material, so They won't sag, and they don't have fluctuation in terms of temperature changes. I think they have like a 1% change in expansion contraction, so it's really minimal. So the pieces are not going to sag, and I think just because the fact that every strand of thread is standing on its own, meaning that we're not talking about a weaving, so there might be like an inherent section of the thread that might be a little weak for manufacturing processes or whatever, and imperfection, and it might snap, but so far I haven't really had that issue. Mainly the issues that I have is when people are able to touch them. So in that sense, when I'm doing a private commission, I really try to stay away from doing pieces that people can touch.
Okay.
So I mostly take on pieces that would be able to be 10 foot off the ground.
Got it.
Or they're in an environment that's not an issue, like there's no foot traffic. Or there's some sort of control, means to control that people don't touch it.
Right. Have you had any of those installed long enough to for them to think about needing to be cleaned? Yes.
Yeah, and they need to be air dusted.
Got it.
And air dusted. I just had a piece being cleaned by a friend of mine, John Campbell, he used to be the conservator at the Nasher. He now has his private practice in New York, but he just cleaned a piece up there, and he used leaf blowers,
right?
Just air dusting it, and and he part of it he also used microfiber cloth, just to be able to take the dust off. But yeah, so that's the cleaning.
Sure.
And then the other aspect, which I actually haven't had to do so far, is the rethreading.
Right.
In which case, it's like a solid joint that can be moved, or my pins cannot be moved, but
right.
But a solid wood can be.
Yeah, and I thought about that, because when I was thinking about the conservatorship of your pieces, or the conservation of your pieces, I was thinking, 80 years from now, if you're not around anymore, and there's a piece there, it seems like it wouldn't be unlike a Solowit where he's left this this recipe in the space, in the intent, and if the hooks are there and you can match the color, if you were to rethread it the same way, it would still be your work because it was still your concept for that space using that material, right? And so
exactly. And I mean that's coming into play a lot more in terms of museums collecting the work, and so that is starting to be a very big part of the conversation. What happens if I die tomorrow? Who's going to be able to redo it? And so I think right now the idea is to set up some sort of process in place that allows to take over for when the time comes then that I'm not longer alive or capable doing them.
Right.
It's funny because when Shelby decided to not work with me anymore, mainly because she was really tired of traveling, because we do travel a lot, and I did make her promise to me that if I were to die, that she was going to be able to pass on the knowledge of how to put these pieces together, because you know, and I think right now there's a couple people that would be able to consult and come together and sort of start the motions to set up some sort of system in place. But so yeah,
right.
That's something. I mean, it's funny because to me it's not shocking anymore thinking about dying.
No.
But because it's something that I've had to actually grapple with. Because what's going to happen if? Because of course I want my work to live on beyond my lifetime. So
sure. And so for those pieces that aren't part of permanent collections, they become relics.
Yes.
And so maybe you could describe some of the forms that takes.
Well, so, the installations are very ethereal, they're big, and they're very geometric, and it's all straight lines, so they're very rigid in that sense. When they come down, it's sort of the opposite, and they're dense, they're small, and they're like organic. They're just it's literally a pile of thread, which is very beautiful in its own right.
Right.
So what I do is a number of things. I can. The first thing I did with them was putting them in plexiglass cubes, and they also that's sort of the first thing. The second I did was put them in frames, so it kind of looked like a painting.
Yeah, I remember I saw one. I think I posted a photo of it on Instagram one time. I had seen it at Tally Dunn. There were some conceptual drawings and then there was like one where there were like loops of color.
And that's actually not a relic. That's actually work
that was
that
its own
has
individual piece?
Right.
Okay.
That is work that was sort of developed, inspired by the process of taking the pieces down.
Got it.
But they're not relics. These are more like behind glass.
Got it.
And it looks. The thread takes on this very painterly quality to it. So,
all right. So, what about? I think I'd seen some where are the relics always behind glass? I think I'd seen somewhere it was sort of a cascading mass of thread coming off a central point that may be like 8 or 10 feet up, or maybe I'm getting the size wrong. But
it's sort of this cascading wall of thread, and again, that's another piece that's sort of inspired by the process of taking the pieces down.
Okay.
But it's not. It's sort of like a standalone thing.
All right. Okay. So what about the Christmas ornaments that your sister makes? Are those relics?
No, but they're also inspired by the relics. We're we're taking that concept and running with it in all different directions, but
that's that's a beautiful thing about an artistic practice, right? I mean, it's you haven't painted yourself into a corner. You've actually just kind of opened up this whole what you're doing is going in all these different directions.
No, it's definitely. I mean, it's opened up a lot of avenues of exploration. One of the things that the installation sort of led me to was what I call the game theory series, and that is more sort of the installations led me to that indirectly because traveling so much and spending so many nights in hotel rooms, I I started drawing